Hello and welcome to another edition of Chiodini's Kitchen, video game recipes made real. Now this week we're tackling another one of our most requested games. We're doing maple bars from Stardew Valley. Now what is a maple bar? That's a good question, and to be honest, I didn't know the answer myself until I started prepping for this episode. I kind of thought it would be like a cereal bar, but it turns out that no, it's actually something more like a donut. Either way, it's something you can create in Stardew Valley after learning the recipe off the TV. Thing is, we don't really have maple bars here in the UK, and for that reason the only recipes I could find online were ones using American cup measurements. Luckily I managed to find some measuring cups going cheap on the internet, so stick with me on this one and we'll be back to using the blessed metric system in no time at all. Anyway, for this recipe you will need 1.5 cups of milk, 1/3 cup of butter, 4 tablespoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1/4 cup of water, 2 1/4 ounce packages of yeast, that's 7-gram sachets to you and me, 2 large eggs, and 4 3/4 cups of plain flour. Then, for the icing, you'll need 1/3 cup of butter, 1 cup of packed brown sugar, 1/4 cup of milk, 1.5 cups of icing sugar, and 2 teaspoons of maple syrup. Right, I think I understood most of that, so let's get cracking. Step 1 is to scald some milk. Now, scalding milk is actually very simple. You just take your milk, that's 1 cup, and then 1/2 cup. You put it in a pan like this, you bring it to the boil, and then you just take it off the heat again. The idea behind this is it's going to make our dough nice and light. Do be careful though not to let it boil over or let it burn. Do just watch it closely as it heats. So now that's done, we're going to add our butter, sugar, cinnamon and salt and stir until it's all dissolved. Just realised I forgot to tell you about cinnamon at the start of this episode. We're adding 2 teaspoons, if you were wondering. So with all that stuff nicely dissolved in the pan, we now need to leave it until it's cooled to a lukewarm temperature. So this will be a good time to go tend to some chickens or do some gardening or any number of other twee things you can do around your homestead. Right, so our milky cinnamon mixture has cooled right down now, so it's time to start making the dough. Step 1 is we're going to turn to our 2 sachets of dried yeast. So that's about 14 grams. To the right thinking people. I'm going to put that in a bowl there. And to that we're going to add let me just make sure I get this right, 1/4 cup of water and stir that until the yeast has dissolved. Next up we're just going to beat 2 eggs. 1, 2, yeah, and there you go. And then we're just going to turn back to our saucepan mixture and pour that in and mix it all up together. And this is going to form the basis for our dough. So what we need to do next is very slowly start adding in the flour, 4.5 cups I think it is, I'll double check that, in order to form a dough. 4 3/4 cups of flour, it turns out. American measurements. Alright, so what we've ended up with here is a dough that, to be honest, is quite... It smells good, but it's kind of on the sticky side. So what I'm going to do now is I need to knead it so that it's nice and smooth, but I'm going to make sure I've put absolutely loads of flour down before I do that. I'm going to get some on my hands so that they don't stick as well, and we'll just see what we come out with. Alright, so here is our dough, which I'm quite pleased with, to be perfectly honest. I think that's going to turn into some very nice maple bars. So what I'm going to do now is put this in a bowl, cover that with cling film, and leave it to rise for a whole hour. Alright, so like I said, our dough is now going to be proving for an entire hour. During that time, why not wander around your local neighbourhood and see whether you can meet any eligible people and then make them your spouse. Personally, I'm already getting married this year, so I'm just going to walk the dog. Or failing that, you could start again from the beginning because you just checked the recipe and realised you put in 2 fucking tablespoons of salt, not teaspoons, which is what you were supposed to put in. Teaspoons. Oh God, we're out of eggs. Right, now we can walk the dog.
Sit. Good girl.
Right then, it's been about an hour, and as you can see, our dough, which is obviously our second batch of dough with a normal amount of salt in it, has risen really nicely. So what I'm going to do is just try and knock it back, push some of the air out of this. Oh, that is a sticky, sticky dough. I'm going to knock this back, push all the air out of it basically, and then roll it out on the countertop here to about 1 inch thickness. Okay, so our dough's been rolled out to about roughly 1 inch, and now it's time to cut it into maple bars. Some people say to do these into squares, but if you look at the in-game item in Stardew Valley, they're actually kind of oblongs. So that's what we're going to go with. So I've just finished cutting up the maple bars and putting them onto these baking trays with grease-proof paper. To be honest, some of them came out as squares, some of them came out as arrowheads. That one's an oblong, at least. Despite my best intentions, these are all pretty weirdly misshapen, but never mind. What we're going to do now is leave these for about 10 to 15 minutes just to get a second proof before they go into the oven, which we're now going to preheat to gas mark 7, which is some numbers in centigrade and some other numbers in Fahrenheit. Can't really remember. If you haven't already gathered, I'm not having a very good day at the office. Alright, so they've had their second proving. To be honest, I don't really see much of a difference. That one's maybe a bit bigger, but it's time for these to go in the oven, apparently for just 7 or 8 minutes, so I'm going to watch them carefully and make sure they don't burn. Oh no. Alright, so they might be slightly overdone on the top, but either way, those are some baked maple bars. So I am now going to leave those to cool down completely, and in the meantime, we need to make the icing. Righto, so we've got a clean saucepan now, and we're going to add to that a third of a cup of butter, a whole cup of brown sugar, and then a quarter cup of milk. This is not one of the healthiest recipes, whoopsie, I have ever made on this show. We're now going to get some heat under that. Oops. Bring it to the boil and start simmering it down. Okay, so we simmered that down for sort of maybe 3.5 minutes there. Now we're just going to leave that to cool for 15 minutes before we finish that off, and then glaze the maple bars. Alright then, so final steps. Our icing's been cooling down for about 15 minutes, and now we just need to stir in 1.5 cups of icing sugar, and then some maple syrup. Now, I have to confess I may have got slightly overexcited while buying ingredients for this recipe, and I may have convinced myself it was somehow acceptable to buy an entire litre? Anyway, we need 2 teaspoons of this. Alright, so here is our icing. As you can see, it's gone lovely and glossy. So what we're going to do is spread it on one of our cooled buns, and then our maple bars will be ready to go. Okay, so here is a maple bar from Stardew Valley. All in all, I think that's turned out pretty well. It looks relatively like the in-game item. I think the pixel count is considerably higher, but most importantly, how does it taste? Let's find out before it drips all over the floor. Wow, that is incredibly sweet, but really, really good. You know, that might actually be better than the sweet rolls we made a little while ago. The icing is incredibly sweet. The maple syrup obviously adds a lot of flavour there, but then you've got the cinnamon in the bun, which I'm very pleased with actually from the way they baked. I thought maybe they weren't in the oven for long enough, despite the fact the tops kind of went really brown. But the cinnamon just counteracts it beautifully, and it's sweet, and it's... I want to keep eating this immediately, but I have to keep talking. It's sweet, but it's also just bready and satisfying, and that is really, really, really good. I'm going to stop talking now so I can eat the rest of this thing. Okay, that about does it for another edition of Chiodini's Kitchen. Thank you very much for joining me. To be honest, it was a bit of a roller coaster, a bit up and down there, but we made it in the end, and we made some really tasty maple bars. So thanks to everyone who suggested we cover something from Stardew Valley, especially the maple bars, because yeah, they were delicious. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, there are plenty more for you to watch, framing my face about now. Do like and subscribe if you feel like it, but if not, honestly, there is no pressure. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and have a lovely day.